So can you tell us some of the positives of gaming?
I'm glad we've started off on the positive because it's easy to start off on the negatives, but there are lots of them. We work with lots of young people and adults that are regular gamers that find it exciting. Some people and young people who are going through mental illness use it for escapism and to switch off from that. Quick thinking, problem solving, and also, you know, people use it for community now. So I know a few years ago when I was a younger lad that when I first started playing a game, it was a console that you went in your bedroom and you played it on your own. Now there's a all online community that you can sort of play in, so it keeps people connected. I know through the pandemic a lot of young people wasn't in school, wasn't seeing their friends, and that was a positive that they could stay connected. So a massive online community.
And what about some of the negatives of gaming?
I think the biggest one is when people are playing on games for too long, the impact on mental health. I think a lot of young people especially, but also adults, plan to go on there for a few hours and end up going on there for several hours, which can have a real negative impact when you're looking at a screen. Frustration when the game's not going well. Sleep, we're coming across a lot of people who are struggling with sleep because they've been playing a game far too long. So that can obviously have an impact on your mental health in the day. It also can create debt, something that's probably new to gaming, but things like loot boxes and skins that people are spending too much money on. We're big and massive on, you know, having a plan how much money you're spending on these games, but it can certainly have an impact on that. So all them things do have a negative impact, but the biggest one I think is mental health.
So how has gaming changed over the years?
So I think when gaming, when I was younger, you know, it was just a console. The graphics weren't very good, and at the time we thought the graphics were great, but you're looking back, very real life. You know, the technology is unbelievable. The graphics, the sound, it's almost like real life, and so many young people that we work with in schools now turn around and say they feel like they're in a real life game. So whether they're in a war game, they feel like they're in war. Whether they're in a football match, they feel like they're on that field. I think that's the first one. The next one is the online community, as I've touched on in the positives. I think that's a massive thing for people feeling connected, but also making new friends. So a lot of young people now, and adults that play games, stay connected through that and develop relationships over it. So that's a big one. I think there's 1.5 billion people that play computer games every single day across the world, and there's always ways to connect with them people, even not just people in the UK. But I think the biggest one in particular for young people, but also adults, is smartphones and devices that you can play on. So now you can walk around with technically a computer game in your pocket, whereas a few years ago you would have had to plug a computer in, it would have had to be in your house. Now with all the apps and the technology, young people can be playing games 24/7, even when they're in the back of the car travelling, and it's so readily available for young people.
So following on from that, what is the impact on mental health?
So, as I've touched on, it's not always negative. Sometimes it's positive. A lot of people that we work with in schools and young people sometimes use it for escapism. They might be going through a challenging time and they feel like that when they're playing a computer, it almost helps the mental health, but there's a tipping point. Most people stay on a computer game too long, so that's why we're big on telling people there should be a planner, they should stick to time limits, because most people, on average, they say play for 2 hours a day. We are coming across so many people who are staying up all night, playing on it far too long, insomnia, not getting enough sleep, and that has a massive impact on them the next day. The next one is the sort of habit going to an addiction. So they say if you have got a habit, you can stop it in 30 days. If you've got an addiction, it's very difficult to stop in 30 days. If you ask most people if they could stop a computer game in 30 days, they'd find it very difficult, and that's a big sign of addiction. When something's taken away, if you become agitated, discontent. We've heard lots of different stories from the last 4 years of working in schools. I think from the pandemic it's got a little bit worse because everyone was stuck at home playing on these computer games. But we have heard some horror stories basically of people and young people being having the computer taken away from them, becoming very angry, violent, smashing the room up. So I do believe that it is a bigger problem than you might see on a TV advert when it's advertising a new computer game. and then sort of being disconnected from reality. You know, that's a big thing. People use it for escapism, but it's not reality of what they're playing in the computer game.
So what are the links to gambling?
So originally you used to plug your computer game in and there was no danger of you spending any more money other than the purchase that you'd use for the console and the computer game. But now, with things like loot boxes and skins and FIFA packs, you can spend money on in-house apps, and the lines have become very blurred between gaming and gambling, and that's really prominent because a lot of people that we come across that reach out for gaming reach out because they have spent too much money on that game. And I'll give you an example of that. I was working in a school earlier this year with a year 9 student, and I was mentoring this young lad, and I found out that he was playing a computer game for 12 hours on a Saturday, 12 hours on a Sunday, which at first I said, that's a massive impact on your mental health. We then touched on the skins and loot boxes. And what had happened is, in the previous 12 months, is his mum had agreed to give him £20 to purchase an in-house app, and the credit card details were put in this computer game. And for the next 12 months, this young lad kept these credit card details in the computer and continued to make purchases until his mum found out that the credit card had been maxed for £3,000. Now, I went through the mental health side with this young person of the impact that that would have playing on a computer game for 12 hours, but also then the impact on what he'd done with his mum's credit card. And when I asked him, the sort of description and way he sort of told me what had happened was very similar to how I gambled, and he just said I was just pressing a button. So a lot of these people are looking at virtual money as not real money. They're not seeing it as real currency. You know, if that young person had £3,000 in his hand, would he go and place that on all them games or go in a shop and spend that? And because it's virtual, it's just that easy and that quick. And that is no different to how I used to play a roulette machine. So I do believe the lines have become really blurred between gaming and gambling.
And finally, is there any advice for anyone that's struggling with gaming?
Yeah, so I think most people who are struggling with gaming won't really know until, you know, something extreme happens like that. But ask yourself the questions. Is it impacting my mental health? Am I staying on the games too long? Do I become agitated or discontent when I can't go on the computer game? Am I thinking about it at school or the workplace? I can't wait to get home to play on the computer game. And if you answer some of them questions, there's a good chance that you've already got a problem with the computer game. The first one that we always say to someone if they think they've got a problem is talk to someone. And that can come in many forms. You can talk to a family member, you can talk to a parent, a brother or a sister, you can talk to a friend, you can talk to a school teacher, you can talk to someone in the workplace. But make yourself accountable and say, I think I've got an unhealthy relationship with gaming. The next one is try and manage it. Write down a planner. We're big on routine and structure, but sort of plan how much each week you are going to spend on that computer game and check it. So if you've said on a Monday evening when you get home from work or you get home from school that you're only going on it for 2 hours, and then you start at 6 o'clock and you're still on it at 10, you can check yourself, put a red mark against it. On the first day, you've already gone over. Therefore, the day after, you shouldn't be playing it as much. And try and really self-check that all the time. Do the same with your finances. How much money do you spend on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on in-house apps? Most people will find they don't really know that figure, they sort of guess it. And then when they look back over the month, they realise they've spent a little bit too much on it. So make a plan, stick to it, and that's really important. They are sort of things that you can do on your own to manage it, but there are other things that you can do if you feel like it's a problem. Again, tracking your spending, that's a massive one. Write down how you're feeling before you're playing a computer game. So are you playing on this computer game to escape a problem? Escape something that you've got going on in your life? If you are playing it for that reason, it's probably not the right thing to do. There are probably much more healthy coping mechanisms that you can do. Going out for a walk, exercise, that will help you more, because when you play a computer game for 3 hours, when you finish it, that problem will still be there. And finally, I think the last one is, which can be a very difficult one to sort of admit, and I've been there with addiction, is if you've tried all them things and gaming still is taking over your life, you're still playing it too long, it's still having an impact on yourself and other people, your workplace, your school, whoever it may be, then get some professional help. Because if you've tried all them things that I've gone through and you're still struggling to stop, then I would strongly advise to get some professional help, and we're going to put some links on the end of this video. One thing I want to aim this video at as well is parents. I think we're so used to, in today's generation from a young age, to giving a child a device from a young age and sit him in front of a computer game. And I think it's sort of the new dummy. I think, you know, years ago you would have been sat there in a restaurant and a child would have been maybe crying and given a dummy at a young age, and that would have stopped them. I think now it's been replaced with an iPad and a smartphone. And I think by the age of 6 or 7, if you're taking that away from a young person and they're becoming agitated and discontent, there's a good chance that young person is already addicted. They're being brought up in a much different world than we are today. So let's try and prevent that from a young age. However, to the ones that are really struggling when they're in the teens and they're struggling to manage it, have open discussions with it. I had an addiction. I always tried to keep it from my mum. Every time she sort of mentioned it, I try and swerved it. I wish at times she'd been a little bit more pressing with me and asked a little bit more, and she might have got a little bit more information. So if you are worried about someone, you know, a son or a daughter that's going through this, or you're worried about your partner that's struggling with these things, be direct, be open, create an openness where you can have that conversation. And to anyone that's putting a device in a young person's face from a young age, just be conscious how long they're using it, and are they sort of relying on that to deal with life, basically. So yeah, I'm going to put some useful links on after this, and we hope you've enjoyed this session.